What if everything you think you know about reality is wrong? What if the universe did not create you? What if you created the universe? This is not philosophy. This is not religion. This is a theory suggested by one of the most successful scientists alive today. A theory that says consciousness does not come from the brain. The brain comes from consciousness. That space and time do not exist the way you think they do. And that death, the thing you fear most, may not exist at all. This is biocentrism, and by the end of this video you will never see reality the same way again. But before we begin, do not forget to subscribe, and if you truly enjoy these videos, please leave a like. Let us begin. What you are about to hear may challenge everything you think you know about reality, about the universe, about yourself. We are going to explore a theory so radical that mainstream science has tried to ignore it. A theory that says consciousness does not come from the brain. It says the brain comes from consciousness, that the universe did not create life. Life created the universe, and if this theory is correct, then death as you understand it does not exist. This is biocentrism and it changes everything. Let us begin. Chapter 1. The night everything changed. Imagine standing outside on a clear night, the kind of night where the stars seem close enough to touch. You look up at the sky and you see thousands of points of light. Some of those lights left their source millions of years ago. They have been traveling through the empty space long before humans walked the earth. Long before dinosaurs, long before life itself rose from the ancient oceans. You feel small, unimportant, a brief spark of awareness in an old and uncaring universe. This is the story science has told us for centuries. The universe is huge. It is old. It works by fixed laws that do not care about your hopes or fears or dreams. You are an accident, a lucky mix of carbon and water that somehow gained the ability to think about its own existence. And when you die, that thinking stops. The atoms that made you scatter back into space. The universe goes on without you, just as it existed for billions of years before you were born. This is the standard story, the accepted view, the story that appears in textbooks and documentaries and popular science books. It feels true because it is familiar, because we have heard it so many times that questioning it seems almost silly. But what if this story is wrong? What if the universe you see when you look up at the night sky does not exist without you looking at it? What if space and time are not containers that hold reality, but tools your mind uses to organize experience? What if consciousness is not something made by matter, but the base on which matter depends? These questions sound like philosophy, like late-night thinking after too much wine. But they are being asked by serious scientists, by researchers who have spent many years studying quantum mechanics and biology and how perception works. And the answers they are finding threaten to overturn 300 years of scientific belief. The night everything changed was not one single night. It was a slow buildup of evidence, experiments that gave results no one expected, observations that would not fit the old models. And at the center of this quiet revolution stands a man named Robert Lanza. Lanza is not a philosopher. He is not a mystic. He is a medical doctor and scientist who has been called one of the most important minds in modern biology. He helped lead stem cell research. He has cloned endangered animals. He has published hundreds of peer-reviewed papers and holds many patents. His position in mainstream science is unquestionable. And yet in 2007, he proposed a theory many of his co-workers thought was wrong or dangerous. He called it biocentrism, life-centered. The main idea is simple to say and shocking in what it means. Biology is more basic than physics. Consciousness creates the universe, not the other way around. To understand why this idea matters, you must understand the problem it tries to solve. And that problem has troubled physics for almost 100 years. It began in the early 1900s. Scientists were studying the nature of matter at smaller and smaller sizes. They expected to find tiny solid balls, hard particles that followed clear rules. Instead, they found something that broke every idea about how reality should work. At the quantum level, particles do not have clear properties until they are observed. An electron does not exist in one exact place until someone measures it. Before it is measured, it exists as a chance wave, a spread-out possibility across space. The act of observing collapses this wave and forces the particle to choose a position. This is not a metaphor. It is not a problem with our tools. It is how reality truly behaves at its deepest level. The observer plays an active role in deciding what exists. For many years, physicists have struggled with what this means. Some have tried to remove the observer by finding processes that collapse the wave without consciousness. Others have said that all possible results happen, splitting the universe into endless branches. Others refuse to ask the question at all, using quantum mechanics only as a way to predict results instead of explain reality. But the problem remains. The observer keeps showing up in the math. Consciousness keeps entering what was meant to be a purely physical universe. Robert Lanza looked at this problem and saw something others missed. The reason physics cannot explain the observer is because physics has it backward. Consciousness is not something that comes from physical processes. Physical processes come from consciousness. The universe looks the way it does because consciousness is observing it. This sounds like solipsism, like saying only your own mind exists. But bioentrism makes a gentler claim. It says that consciousness is a basic part of reality, maybe the most basic part. Without consciousness, there is no space, no time, no matter as we understand them. These things exist only as experiences inside awareness. Think about color. You look at a rose and see red, but red does not exist outside in the world. What exists is light with a wavelength around 700 nanometers. Your eye senses this light. Your brain processes the signal, and somewhere in that process, the experience of red appears. The redness is not outside. It is inside consciousness. Now take this idea further. Think about space. You see objects as being far apart or close together, but distance is a perception. It is how your mind organizes information from the senses. Think about time. You feel moments moving from past to future. But time is also a perception, a system your mind uses to arrange events. What bioentrism suggests is that all reality works this way. The whole universe, from the biggest galaxy to the smallest particle, exists as it does because consciousness experiences it. Take away consciousness and you do not get an empty universe waiting in the dark. You get nothing at all, no space for things to exist, no time for events to happen. The night sky you look at is not a window into a world that exists without you. It is a construction, a beautiful and consistent construction, but a construction all the same. And the builder is consciousness itself. This is the bold center of bioentrism. And in the chapters that follow, we will explore the evidence that supports it. We will look at experiments that show the strange role of observation in quantum mechanics. We will see how space and time behave in ways that only make sense if they are products of the mind, instead of parts of an outside world. We will think about what this theory means for death and whether consciousness can truly end. But first, we must understand the man who brought these ideas together. Because Robert Lanza did not reach bioentrism through guessing or imagination. He reached it through a lifetime of scientific work that kept pointing to the same uncomfortable conclusion. The universe needs us just as much as we need it. The meaning of that night under the stars when you felt so small and unimportant may be exactly the opposite. You are not an accident in an uncaring universe. You are the reason there is a universe at all. That is the claim. Now let us look at the evidence. The story of bioentrism cannot be separated from the story of the man who created it. Robert Lanza grew up poor in Stoughton, Massachusetts, a working-class town south of Boston. His father drove a truck. His mother stayed at home. There were no scientists in his family, no teachers, no one who could have guessed that this boy would one day challenge the basics of physics. But Lanza was different from the start. He had a deep curiosity about the natural world. As a child, he caught butterflies and studied them with a magnifying glass. He collected rocks and leaves and dead insects. He wanted to know how things worked, not just on the surface, but deep down. His way into science was unusual. Without money for formal education, he did experiments in his basement. As a teenager, he successfully changed the genetics of chickens, something that caught the attention of researchers at Harvard Medical School. They invited him to their labs. A poor kid from a working-class town was suddenly working alongside some of the best scientists in the world. Lanza did well. He later studied at the University of Pennsylvania, worked with leaders in transplant medicine, and eventually became a major figure in regenerative medicine. He was the first to clone an endangered species. He developed ways to grow human organs from stem cells. His work appeared in the most respected scientific journals. But during his career, Lanza kept facing questions biology could not answer. He was working with life, with living cells and tissues. And the more he studied life, the more he saw that something was missing from science's picture of reality. That missing thing was consciousness. The cells he studied in labs were alive. They grew and divided and reacted to their surroundings, but they were not aware. A liver cell does not know it is a liver cell. An embryonic stem cell does not experience the world. Yet somewhere in the chain of biological complexity, awareness appears. Somehow groups of cells become conscious beings who can think about their own existence. Science has no clear explanation for this. The hard problem of consciousness, as philosopher David Chalmers named it, is still unsolved. We can map the brain down to single neurons. We can follow the paths that handle sensory signals. But we cannot explain how or why this activity comes with personal experience. We cannot explain why it feels like something to be you. For Lanza, this gap showed a deep mistake in how science looks at reality. We assume matter comes first and consciousness comes later. We assume the physical world exists on its own and minds somehow grow out of it. But what if this belief is wrong? The evidence from quantum mechanics suggested it might be. The observer effect, wave collapse, entanglement, all of these ideas seem to give consciousness a role in shaping physical reality. Physicists saw this as a problem to fix. Lanza saw it as a clue to follow. He began to form what became biocentrism. The main idea was that biology should not bow to physics. The two fields should stand side by side. And when biology is taken seriously, when we accept that all observation and experience happen inside consciousness, the mysteries of quantum mechanics begin to make sense. The universe does not exist first and then get observed. Observation is part of existence from the start. Consciousness is not something added late to an already existing universe. It is the base from which the universe grows. In 2007, Lanza published an essay in the American Scholar explaining these ideas. The reaction was divided. Some people found it deep and meaningful. Others called it false science hidden behind complex words. But the discussion had started, and as we will see, support for biocentrism has only increased since then. The double-slit experiment waits, the most beautiful and unsettling experiment in physics. An experiment that shows clearly that the observer changes what is observed. The universe, it seems, is watching us watch it. Chapter 2. The Man Behind the Theory. To understand biocentrism, you must first understand the unlikely path of the man who brought it into the world. Robert Lanza was not expected to become a scientist. He was not expected to challenge the foundations of physics. He was expected to follow his father into manual work, maybe drive a truck, maybe work in a factory. The universe had different plans. Stoughton, Massachusetts in the 1960s was not a place known for producing great thinkers. It was a working-class town where people kept quiet and did their jobs. Big dreams were seen as risky. Hope was for people who did not worry about paying bills. Lanza's family struggled. There was never enough money, never enough time, never enough of anything except hardship and daily survival. But even as a young child, Lanza stood out. He noticed things other children ignored. He watched ants carry crumbs across the sidewalk and wondered how they knew where to go. He looked at the sky and asked why it was blue instead of green. He asked his parents questions they could not answer. Why do birds fly? Why do fish have scales? Why does the sun rise in the east? There were no books in his home, no encyclopedia, no one to explain the mysteries he saw every day. So Lanza did what scientists have always done. He explored on his own. His first lab was the basement of his family home. It was damp and dark, filled with old tools and forgotten boxes. Lanza cleared a small area and began collecting samples, insects, plants, anything he could find and study. He saved his allowance and bought a cheap microscope. He spent hours looking through the lens at a hidden world. By the time he was a teenager, Lanza moved beyond watching to experimenting. He read about genetics in library books and decided to test what he learned. His subjects were chickens, especially the eggs his family used for food. Using methods he taught himself from scientific papers, he changed how genes worked in growing embryos. He changed the color of the chickens that were born. This was not homework. This was real scientific research done by a teenager in a basement with no formal training and almost no tools. News of his work reached Harvard Medical School. Scientists there doubted it at first. How could a high school student from a poor family do something that usually needs advanced labs and years of training? They invited him to visit. They thought they would find a mistake or a misunderstanding. Instead, they found something amazing. Lanza knew his science. His experiments were real. His knowledge of genetics was far beyond his age. Harvard offered him a place in their labs. Imagine that moment. A kid from a struggling family. A kid who had never been inside a university, walking into one of the most respected medical schools in the world. Everything he knew, he had learned on his own. Everything he had done alone. And now he was being welcomed by the scientific world he had only admired from a distance. Lanza grabbed the chance. He worked harder than anyone because he knew how rare this opportunity was. He went on to study at the University of Pennsylvania. He trained with leaders of modern medicine. He learned transplant surgery. He learned immunology. He learned everything he could, but his true passion was regenerative medicine. The idea that damaged tissues could heal, that organs could be grown, that the body could be fixed in ways earlier generations would have thought impossible. Stem cells became his focus. These special cells can turn into any type of tissue in the body. With the right signals, a stem cell can become a heart cell or a liver cell or a brain cell. The meaning for medicine is huge. Imagine growing a new heart for someone with heart disease. Imagine fixing a broken spinal cord. Imagine undoing the damage of Parkinson's disease. Lanza followed this goal with endless energy. He developed methods for isolating and growing stem cells. He learned how to guide their development along specific paths. His work was published in Nature, in Science, in The Lancet. He earned patents. He started companies. He became one of the leading figures in his field. In 2001, he and his colleagues achieved something that made headlines around the world. They cloned an endangered species, the gaur, a type of wild ox from Southeast Asia. The clone did not live long, but the idea was proven. Cloning could be used to protect species on the edge of extinction. Later, Lanza cloned a banteng, another endangered bovine, and this time the animal lived. He cloned endangered African wild cats. He developed methods for preserving the genetic material of species that might otherwise disappear forever. His work represented hope for a planet facing mass extinction. By any normal measure, Robert Lanza had achieved extraordinary success. He had risen from nothing to become one of the most accomplished scientists of his generation. He had published more than 30 books. He had been named one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people. He had changed medicine and conservation biology, but something bothered him throughout his career. He kept running into a question that biology could not answer. A question that haunted every experiment, every observation, every moment of scientific work. What is consciousness? He worked with cells, living cells, cells that grew and divided and reacted to signals. But these cells were not aware. They did not experience anything. They were biological machines following chemical instructions. Yet somewhere in the levels of life, awareness appeared. Somewhere between a single cell and a human brain, the universe became aware of itself. How? Why? Where exactly did consciousness come from? The standard scientific answer did not satisfy him. Consciousness comes from complexity. When enough neurons fire in the right patterns, personal experience somehow appears. But this explained nothing. It was like saying that if you put enough gears and springs together, a clock will start to feel time passing. The explanation did not match the experience. Lanza began reading outside his field. He studied the philosophy of mind. He read about the history of physics. He deeply studied quantum mechanics, the strange branch of science that deals with the behavior of matter at its smallest levels. And there, in the quantum world, he found something unexpected. The observer problem. In quantum mechanics, the act of observing changes what is being observed. Particles do not have clear properties until someone measures them. Before measurement, they exist in superposition, a blur of possibilities. The act of looking forces them to choose, forces them to become something. Physicists had known this for almost 100 years. They had created complex math to describe it, but they had not explained it. They could not say why observation mattered. They could not say what it was about consciousness that collapsed the wave function. Some physicists suggested that consciousness itself played a basic role. John von Neumann, one of the greatest mathematicians of the 20th century, argued that quantum mechanics required a conscious observer to work. Eugene Wigner, a Nobel Prize winner, suggested that consciousness was the key to understanding quantum reality. But most physicists avoided these ideas. They seemed too mystical, too far from the strict material thinking that had made physics so successful. The mainstream belief was that consciousness would someday be explained in physical terms. It was only a matter of time. Lanza was not convinced. The more he studied, the more he suspected that the link between consciousness and physics was not a problem to solve, but a clue to follow. What if consciousness was not a result of physical processes? What if physical processes were results of consciousness? The idea sounded crazy. It went against everything science had believed for 300 years. Since Newton, physics had described a universe of matter in motion ruled by math laws that did not care if anyone was watching. The universe existed, period. Consciousness was an afterthought, a strange effect that would someday be reduced to neurons and chemicals. But quantum mechanics kept refusing to fit this picture. The observer kept appearing. Consciousness kept mattering in ways that the material view could not explain. Lanza began to create an alternative, a theory that placed biology, the science of life, at the center of everything. A theory that said consciousness was not an afterthought, but the foundation. A theory that would explain why the observer mattered in quantum mechanics, why the universe seemed perfectly adjusted for life, why reality had the structure it did. He called it biocentrism. The name was chosen carefully. It opposed the dominant view, which he called the physicist-centered view. That view put physics at the center. It said the universe came first, and life was a lucky accident that appeared later. Biocentrism flipped this order. Biology came first, consciousness came first. The universe as we know it was a result of awareness, not its cause. This was not mysticism. Lanza carefully supported his theory with scientific evidence. He pointed to quantum experiments. He pointed to the fine-tuning problem, the fact that the laws of physics seem exactly set to allow life to exist. He pointed to the hard problem of consciousness, which no material explanation had solved. Biocentrism, he argued, made sense of all these problems. It explained why the observer mattered in quantum mechanics. Of course, the observer mattered. Without an observer, there was no observed reality. It explained fine-tuning. The universe looked designed for life because life was needed for the universe to exist in the first place. It solved the hard problem. Consciousness did not need to be explained using matter because matter was explained using consciousness. In 2007, Lanza published an essay in the American Scholar called A New Theory of the Universe. The reaction was fast and divided. Some readers felt freed. At last, someone was taking consciousness seriously. At last, someone was accepting what quantum experiments seemed to show. Others reacted angrily. This was not science, they said. This was philosophy. Worse, it was bad philosophy. It was idealism dressed up as science. It betrayed everything the scientific method stood for. Lanza expected the criticism. He had spent his life as an outsider. The kid from the basement, the scientist without proper credentials. He had always had to prove himself. He had always had to fight for respect. This was just another fight. 2 years later, he published Biocentrism, How Life and Consciousness Are the Keys to Understanding the True Nature of the Universe. The book expanded his ideas and shared them with the public. It became a bestseller. It was translated into many languages. Millions of people read it and felt their view of reality change. A second book followed, Beyond Biocentrism. Then a third. Lanza refined his arguments. He answered critics. He added new evidence from physics and neuroscience. The theory changed, but its core stayed the same. Consciousness is basic. Space and time are ideas. The universe exists because we observe it. Not everyone agreed. Many scientists stayed doubtful, but the debate had begun. The question Lanza raised could no longer be ignored. What is consciousness, and what role does it play in reality? These questions were not new. Philosophers had asked them for thousands of years, but now a scientist was asking them. A scientist with credentials and achievements that demanded attention. A scientist who refused to believe that the mind was only a ghost inside a machine. The journey from Stoughton, Massachusetts to the frontiers of physics and philosophy took decades. It required brilliance, determination, and a refusal to accept easy answers. Robert Lanza started with nothing and built one of the most challenging scientific theories of his generation. Whether the theory is correct remains unknown, but its influence is clear. It forced scientists and philosophers to face questions they preferred to avoid. It opened discussions that were long overdue. And it all began with a curious child in a basement wondering how the world worked. The first principle of biocentrism is waiting, the claim that will overturn everything you think you know about reality. Chapter 3. The first principle of biocentrism. Robert Lanza did not present biocentrism as a vague philosophical idea. He organized it into 7 clear principles, 7 statements about the nature of reality that, if true, would change how we understand the universe. These principles build on each other. Each one supports the others. Together, they create a clear picture of existence that puts consciousness at the center of everything. The first principle is the base. It says that what we call reality is a process that includes our consciousness. An outside reality, if it existed, would have to exist in space. But space and time are not objective realities. They are tools of the human and animal mind. Read that again. Let it sink in. Space is not real, not the way you think it is. The room you are in right now, the distance between you and the walls, the space between Earth and the Moon, the huge gaps between galaxies. None of these exist without minds to perceive them. Space is how consciousness organizes experience. It is a framework, not a container. Time is not real either. The past is a memory. The future is an expectation. The present is the only moment you truly experience. And that present is always now. It never changes. The clock on your wall does not measure a flowing river of time. It measures change, movement, and transition. Your brain understands these changes as time passing. But time itself, the invisible thing events are said to move through, does not exist outside conscious experience. This is the first principle of bioentrism, and its meaning is shocking. Consider what this means. You look out a window and see a tree. Common sense says the tree is out there. It exists in space at a certain distance from you. It has been there for years, existing in time. When you look away, the tree still exists. When you sleep, the tree is still there. The tree does not need you to see it. It simply exists. But is this true? What you actually experience when you look at the tree is not the tree itself. You experience light. Photons bounce off the tree's surface, enter your eye, hit your retina, and create electrical signals that travel to your brain. Your brain uses these signals to build an image. The tree you see exists in your mind. The colors, the shapes, the feeling of depth and distance, all of this is created by the mind. The same is true for every sense. When you hear a bird sing, you do not experience sound waves directly. You experience your brain's meaning of air vibrations. When you feel the tree's bark, you do not touch the tree itself. You experience electrical signals made by pressure sensors in your skin. All experience is filtered. All perception is created. The reality you think you meet directly is actually a model your brain builds from limited sensory information. Most people accept this but then say this. Fine, our perception is indirect, but the tree is still there. There is still an outside reality that our senses represent, even if not perfectly. The tree exists whether I look at it or not. This is where the first principle of bioentrism makes its bold move. It asks a simple question. What does it mean to say the tree exists when no one observes it? Think carefully. You cannot prove this claim. You cannot observe an unobserved tree. The moment you look to check if it exists, you are observing it. You become part of the situation. The unobserved tree cannot be experienced in any way. You might say machines can observe the tree when you are not there. A camera, for example, but the camera does not experience anything. It is a physical system that changes when light hits its sensors. Those changes mean nothing until a conscious person looks at the picture. The camera does not prove that the tree exists without consciousness. It is just another physical system, no more aware than the tree itself. This may sound like a trick of words, but it is serious. It connects directly to the deepest problems in physics. Quantum mechanics says particles do not have fixed properties until they are measured. Before measurement, an electron does not have a clear position. It exists as a wave of probability spread through space. Observation collapses this wave and forces the electron to appear in one specific place. This is not just a lack of knowledge. It is not that the electron has a position and we simply do not know it. The math of quantum mechanics says the electron truly does not have a fixed position until it is measured. At the quantum level, reality is unclear until observed. For almost 100 years, physicists have struggled with this meaning. How can observation change reality? Why does consciousness seem to help decide what exists? Bioentrism gives an answer. Observation changes reality because reality is built through observation. Space and time are not ready-made boxes where events happen. They are structures consciousness uses to organize experience. Without consciousness, there is no space. Without consciousness, there is no time. Without consciousness, there is no reality as we understand it. This does not mean that when you close your eyes, the universe disappears. Bioentrism is not solipsism. It does not say that only your mind exists. It says that consciousness itself is basic. Your awareness, my awareness, the awareness of all thinking beings, all take part in creating reality. When you are not looking at the tree, other conscious beings may be. Or the tree may exist as possibility, as probability, waiting to become real through observation. The point is that the tree's existence is not fully separate from observation. It is part of conscious experience. This is a huge change in viewpoint. For 300 years, science has believed that the physical world comes first and consciousness comes later. The universe exists, matter follows laws, and somehow matter becomes complex enough to know itself. Biocentrism reverses this. Consciousness comes first, the physical world comes second. Matter and energy, space and time, exist as they do because consciousness perceives them. The effects are massive. Think about the age of the universe. Standard science says the universe is about 13.8 billion years old. It began with the Big Bang, space expanded. Matter came together, stars formed and died, planets appeared, and finally on one small planet around an ordinary star, life appeared, consciousness evolved. Here we are. In this view, consciousness is new. It arrived late to a universe that existed long before any mind could observe it. But the first principle of biocentrism challenges this story. If time is a creation of consciousness, then the idea of billions of years before consciousness makes no sense. There is no before without an observer to define before and after. The past is an idea, a helpful way to organize memory and history. It is not a place that exists without minds. This does not mean the past did not happen. It means the past exists as a present idea. When you remember yesterday, you are experiencing something now. When scientists study fossils and light from far galaxies, they are having experiences now. The past they describe is a model, a story the present tells about itself. This may sound like wordplay, but think about the delayed choice experiment, which we will explore later. In this experiment, a choice made now can change what seems to have happened in the past. The decision to measure one thing instead of another changes the history of a particle. If the past were fixed and independent, this would be impossible. But if the past is something that is always shaped by what we observe now, then the experiment makes sense. The universe is not like a movie that plays forward in time. It is an active pattern that is always forming through the interaction of awareness and possibility. The first principle of biocentrism also explains why the universe seems perfectly adjusted for life. Scientists have noticed that the basic numbers of nature, like the strength of gravity, the electric charge of the electron, and the speed at which the universe expands, seem exactly set to allow complex things to exist. If any of these numbers were slightly different, stars would not form, chemistry would fail, life would be impossible. Why are these numbers just right? One answer is the anthropic principle. We see a universe that supports life because we could not exist in a universe that does not. But this feels like a circular answer. It does not explain why such a universe exists at all. Biocentrism offers a different idea. The universe looks fine-tuned for life because life is not separate from the universe. Consciousness shapes reality. The numbers are what they are because they are the conditions needed for consciousness to appear and observe itself. The universe is not accidentally livable. It is livable because being livable and being observed are connected. We are not lucky mistakes in a cold and empty universe. We are participants in creating the universe itself. This is the first principle. Reality is a process that includes consciousness. Space and time are ideas created by the mind. The universe as we know it depends on observers. If this is true, then everything changes. The questions we ask about existence must be asked in new ways. The beliefs we carry about what is real must be questioned. In the next chapter, we will examine the experiment that moved these ideas from philosophy into science labs. The double-slit experiment, the most famous experiment in all of physics. The experiment that clearly shows that the observer matters. Light acts like a wave when no one is watching. It acts like a particle when someone is watching. The same thing changes how it behaves depending on whether awareness is involved. Welcome to the quantum world, where nothing is exactly as it seems, and where biocentrism finds its strongest evidence. Chapter 4, The Double-Slit Experiment. Richard Feynman, one of the greatest physicists of the 20th century, said the double-slit experiment is the central mystery of quantum mechanics. He said it contains the only real mystery. Every other strange effect in the quantum world comes from what this simple experiment shows. The experiment is easy to explain. A source sends particles, such as electrons, toward a barrier. The barrier has two narrow openings. Behind the barrier is a screen that shows where the particles hit. That is it. A source, a barrier with two holes and a screen. High school students can perform versions of this experiment. The equipment is simple. And yet the results have confused scientists for over 100 years. Because what happens depends on whether someone is watching. Let us walk through the experiment step by step. First, imagine that we close one slit. Particles are sent and pass through the one open slit. Some spread out as they pass through, so they form a pattern on the screen. The pattern looks like a fuzzy spot. Most hits are directly behind the slit, with fewer hits farther away. This seems reasonable. Particles go through the opening and spread out slightly. Now imagine we open both slits. If particles were like tiny bullets, you would expect two fuzzy spots on the screen, one behind each slit. The particles would pass through one slit or the other and land in matching places. But that is not what happens. Instead of two spots, you see a striped pattern with areas where many particles land and areas where almost none land. This pattern is typical of waves. When two waves meet, they interact. Where their peaks line up, they strengthen each other. Where a peak meets a low point, they cancel out. This striped pattern tells us that what is passing through the slits is acting like a wave. Not like a particle, not like a bullet. But wait, we are sending single particles, electrons, one at a time. We can slow the source so that only one electron is in the experiment at any moment. Surely one particle must go through one slit or the other. It cannot split itself and go through both. It is a particle. Here is the shocking result. Even when electrons are sent one at a time, the striped wave pattern still slowly appears. Each electron hits one exact spot on the screen. But over time, as many electrons arrive, the overall pattern that forms is still the wave pattern. This means that each electron somehow interferes with itself, as if it went through both slits at the same time, as if it were spread out like a wave until it hit the screen, where it became a single particle at one place. This is strange enough, but it becomes even stranger. Scientists decided to check which slit each electron actually goes through. They placed detectors at the slits, small devices that could detect an electron passing through without disturbing it much. Now we can know. We send electrons and record which slit each one uses. Does it go through the left slit or the right slit? The result destroyed classical thinking. When we observe which slit the electrons pass through, the striped pattern disappears. Instead of stripes, we see two fuzzy spots, one behind each slit. Exactly what you would expect if electrons were normal particles traveling clear paths. Just observing changes the result. Think about that. When we do not observe, electrons act like waves and create stripes. When we do observe, they act like particles and create two spots. The equipment is the same. The only difference is whether information about the path is recorded. This is not a small or rare effect. It is clear and repeatable. Run the experiment many times with detectors and you get spots. Run it many times without detectors and you get stripes. Something about observation, about measuring, about knowing changes reality itself. Scientists have argued about what this means for almost 100 years. The standard explanation, developed in Copenhagen in the 1920s, says that particles do not have fixed properties until they are measured. Before measurement, the electron exists as a wave function, a math description of possibilities. The wave function goes through both slits and interferes with itself. When a measurement happens, the wave function collapses and the electron appears in one place. But what causes this collapse? The Copenhagen view is unclear here. Some versions say the measuring device causes the collapse. Others suggest that consciousness is needed. The argument has never been settled. Other ideas try to avoid collapse completely. The many worlds interpretation says every possible outcome really happens. When the electron reaches the slits, the universe splits. In one version, the electron goes left. In another, it goes right. Both happen. But observers in each version only see one result. There is no collapse because nothing is removed. This idea solves some problems but creates new ones. It suggests that there are countless versions of you living every possible version of your life. Every choice you ever made created another universe. The logical cost is enormous. Other ideas suggest hidden variables, guiding waves, or new physics to explain quantum strangeness without using consciousness. None of these ideas has been fully accepted. After 100 years, scientists still disagree on what quantum mechanics says about reality. Biocentrism cuts through this confusion with a simple idea. Consciousness is not a side effect of physics. Consciousness is central to physics. The observer matters because observation is how reality becomes real. Think about it from the biocentric view. Before measurement, the electron is not a particle in a place. It is not a wave spread out in space. It is a set of possibilities waiting to become real. The wave function is a math description of these possibilities. When consciousness observes, it chooses one result from many options. The wave function collapses because awareness has selected an outcome. Not a planned choice, not a decision, but the natural selection that happens whenever experience occurs. To notice is to choose, to observe is to decide. Without consciousness, nothing is chosen, nothing becomes definite, nothing becomes real. The electron stays as many possibilities because there is no observer for whom one possibility becomes real. This is why the double-slit experiment matters so much to bioentrism. It gives direct experimental evidence that observation matters. Not observation as a camera storing data, but observation as information being available to a conscious mind. Think about what happens when the detector is added at the slits. The detector stores which slit the electron used. Even if you never look at the data, the information exists. It is stored in the physical world. It is available to be known, and that alone removes the striped pattern. Some experiments have tested this idea even further. In delayed choice experiments, the decision to observe is made after the particle has already passed through the slits. You might think it is too late. The particle has already decided what it did. But experiments show that timing does not matter. The result changes after the fact. If you choose to measure, the particle behaves as if it went through one slit. If you do not measure, it behaves as if it went through both. The choice made now changes what appears to have happened before. This is one of the most unsettling results in physics. It suggests that the past is not fixed, that history is not permanent, that how we observe now can change what came before. Classical physics cannot explain this. Materialism cannot explain this, but bioentrism can. If the past exists as something constantly shaped by present awareness, then delayed choice makes sense. The particle's history is not separate from our current observation. Time itself is part of conscious experience. Past and present are not separate boxes, but parts of one ongoing process of awareness. The double-slit experiment also explains the measurement problem. In classical physics, measuring is passive. You look at something and learn what it was already doing. Measuring does not change the object. In quantum physics, measuring is active. It helps decide the result. The electron does not have a position until you measure it. Measurement does not reveal a hidden truth. It creates the truth. This is why consciousness keeps appearing in physics equations, because consciousness is what performs measurement. It is the observer whose observation matters. Without consciousness, there is no true measurement. There is only a swirl of quantum possibilities that never become real. Some scientists try to avoid this by defining measurement as only physical interaction. A measurement happens when a small system interacts with a large one. No awareness needed, just particles hitting particles. But this creates a problem. How big is big enough? How many particles are needed to collapse a wave function? There is no clear line. And if you describe the measuring device using quantum rules, it also exists in many states at once. The measurement is still not complete. The chain of connections just keeps growing. The only way to end the chain is to include an observer, someone who actually knows the result, someone for whom the outcome is clear. Consciousness stops the endless chain. It is where the process ends. This does not prove bioentrism. Science does not prove ideas, but the double-slit experiment offers strong evidence that observation helps shape reality. It supports the biocentric idea that consciousness is not just watching, but actively involved in existence. The quantum world is strange. Particles act like waves until they are observed. The past changes based on present observation. Information and measurement are tied to what exists. For a long time, we believed the universe existed on its own, independent and objective. The double-slit experiment suggests a different view. The universe is not fully real until it is observed. Reality comes from the interaction between awareness and possibility. This is not magic. This is physics, the most tested science we have. And it keeps pointing to the same idea. The observer matters. Next, we will explore time, the movement from past to future that seems so obvious and unavoidable. But is time real? Or is it another idea the mind uses to understand experience? The clock is ticking. Or is it? Chapter 5, time is not what you think. You are reading these words right now. A moment ago you read the sentence before this one. In a moment you will read the next. This feels completely normal. Time moves, it flows. It carries us from past to present to future. But what if this feeling is an illusion? What if time does not exist the way you think it does? This is the second principle of bioentrism. Our inner experiences and outer perceptions are deeply connected. They are two sides of one thing and cannot be separated. Time is one of these perceptions. It is not a dimension like length or width. It is a mental process, a way of thinking. To understand this, we must look at what physics really says about time, and what physics tells us is very strange. Start with Einstein. In 1905, a young patent clerk named Albert Einstein published a paper that changed science forever. It was called On the Electrodynamics of Moving Bodies. Today, we call it special relativity. The main idea was shocking. The speed of light is the same for all observers, no matter how fast they are moving. If you are standing still and I pass you at half the speed of light, we both measure the same speed for light. This seems impossible. If I am already moving fast, light should seem slower to me, like a car driving beside a train. But light does not work that way. Light always moves at about 300,000 kilometers per second. Always, no matter who measures it. Einstein realized that for this to be true, something else must change. That something was time. Time is not fixed. It does not move at the same speed for everyone. If you are moving compared to me, your clock runs slower. This is not a broken clock. Time itself moves more slowly for you. This effect is called time dilation. It is very small in everyday life. But near light speed, it becomes huge. If you traveled in a spaceship at 99% of light speed, time for you would slow down about 7 times. 1 year for you would be 7 years on Earth. This has been proven. Scientists placed atomic clocks on airplanes and compared them with clocks on the ground. The moving clocks ticked slightly slower, exactly as Einstein predicted. Time dilation is real, and it gets even stranger. Not only speed affects time, gravity does too. This comes from general relativity, published in 1915. Mass bends space and time. Clocks in stronger gravity tick more slowly than clocks in weaker gravity. GPS satellites must correct for this. If they did not, their positions would drift by kilometers each day. What does this tell us about time? It tells us time is not one universal flow moving the same everywhere. Time is local. It depends on your movement and your gravity. Your time is not the same as my time. The present moment is not shared by everyone in the same way. This breaks the simple idea of time as something that exists independent of observers. If time were independent, it would move the same for everyone. But it does not. Time is relative. It depends on perspective. It depends on who is measuring and where they are. Now consider the block universe. Einstein's ideas led scientists to picture the universe as a 4-dimensional block. 3 dimensions of space plus 1 dimension of time. In this block, the past, present, and future all exist equally. They are all there, laid out like the frames of a movie strip. Nothing flows, nothing changes. The feeling of flow is an illusion created by consciousness moving through the block. In the block universe, your birth already exists. Your death already exists. Every moment of your life is always present in the 4-dimensional structure. The feeling that time passes, that the future is open and the past is gone, is a feature of conscious experience, not a feature of reality. Many physicists accept this picture. It comes from the mathematics of relativity, and it has a strange result. There is no objective present, no universal now. The moment you call now is just one slice of the block, no more special than any other slice. Biocentrism takes this idea and pushes it further. If time does not truly flow, if the present is not universal, then what is time? It is a form of perception, a way that consciousness organizes experience. The flow you feel, the sense that moments pass and cannot be recovered, is created by your mind, not by the outside world. Think about memory. You remember the past. Those memories exist now in the present. They are current brain states. The past itself is not reachable. You cannot reach back and touch it. All you have are present experiences that you interpret as memories. Think about expectation. You imagine the future. Those expectations exist now in the present. They are current mental states. The future itself has not arrived. You cannot reach forward and touch it. All you have are present experiences that you interpret. As expectations, the present is all you ever experience. This moment now is the only moment that exists for you. And yet the present is always now. It never changes. The content changes. The things you see and feel and think are different from moment to moment. But the container, the eternal now, stays the same. Biocentrism suggests that this is not an accident. It is a clue to the nature of reality. Time is not a dimension out there in the world. Time is a feature of consciousness, a way of organizing experience into before and after. This does not mean you are wrong to plan for the future or learn from the past. The patterns of experience are real. Cause and effect work in reliable ways, but the deeper nature of time is not what common sense suggests. The past is a memory. The future is an expectation. Only the present is real, and the present is always here. Think about the meaning for death. The fear of death is mostly the fear of not existing in the future. You imagine a time when you will no longer be here, a time when the world continues without you. This future time feels real and scary. But if time is built by consciousness, this future does not exist the way you imagine. The block universe idea suggests that all moments are equally real. Your life is not something that ends. It is something that exists forever in the four-dimensional structure. The moments you call past are still there. The moments you call future are already there. Death is a change within the block, not an end of existence. We will explore this more in a later chapter. But the main idea here is that how we understand time shapes how we understand everything else. If time is an illusion, if the flow is created by the mind instead of the world, then many of our deepest fears and beliefs need to be questioned. Quantum mechanics adds another layer of strangeness. In quantum theory, time does not flow the way it does in everyday life. The equations that describe quantum systems are time-symmetric. They work the same forward and backward. There is nothing in the basic laws of physics that separates past from future. This is not true for our large-scale experience. We remember the past, not the future. Eggs break but do not unbreak. Disorder increases. Time seems to have a direction. But where does this direction come from? The basic laws do not include it. Some physicists think the direction comes from statistical mechanics, from how huge numbers of particles behave. Others think it comes from the starting conditions of the universe. Still others think consciousness plays a role. Biocentrism supports the third idea. The direction of time is a feature of conscious experience. We give time direction because that is how our minds work. We create the sense of past and future, of cause and effect, of things that cannot be undone. These are structures of perception, not structures of deepest reality. The delayed choice experiments we discussed earlier support this idea. In those experiments, present choices seem to affect past events. The past is not fixed until it is observed. This does not fit with a purely physical direction of time. But it makes sense if time is a structure shaped by consciousness. None of this is easy to accept. Time feels so real. The flow feels so obvious. The past feels gone and the future feels uncertain. Our whole lives are built around assumptions about time. But remember that many things feel obvious and turn out to be wrong. The earth feels flat. The sun feels like it goes around the earth. Heavy objects feel like they should fall faster than light ones. Our instincts are shaped by evolution to help us survive, not to show us the deepest truth about reality. The science of time has been moving forward quickly. Experiments in quantum systems keep revealing strange connections between time and observation. Theoretical physicists are studying models where time comes from deeper structures, where space-time is not basic but created. We may be close to a major change in how we understand time, and biocentrism may be part of that change. By saying that consciousness is central, it opens new ways of thinking about time experience. Time is not a river carrying you from birth to death. Time is a way of perception, a way awareness organizes experience. Clocks tick, yes, but what they measure is not the true flow of some outside dimension. They measure change, and change is always perceived by someone. Next, we turn to space, the other great framework of physics, the stage where all events are said to happen. But is space any more real than time? Or is it also a product of the mind? The walls around you, the sky above, the distance to the stars. What are these things really? Let us find out. Stop. Chapter 5 complete. I am now pausing and waiting for confirmation before continuing with chapters 6 through 10. Chapter 6. Space is a language of the mind. You are somewhere right now. You currently occupy a position in space. There is a distance between you and the nearest wall, a larger distance between you and the nearest city, a much larger distance between you and the moon, and a distance so huge it is hard to imagine between you and the nearest galaxy beyond our own. Space feels like the most basic thing there is. The container that holds everything, the stage where the story of existence plays out. Without space, where would anything be? Without distance, how could objects exist apart from each other? But biocentrism makes a shocking claim. Space is not a container. Space is not a stage. Space is a form of understanding, a language the mind uses to organize experience. Remove consciousness and space does not exist. This is the third principle of biocentrism. The behavior of tiny particles, and really all particles and objects, is deeply connected to the presence of an observer. Without a conscious observer, they exist only as uncertain probability waves. And the fourth principle extends this to space itself. Without consciousness, matter exists in an uncertain state of probability. Any universe that came before consciousness existed only as a probability state. These ideas challenge everything we think we know about the physical world. Let us look at why. Start with perception. How do you experience space? You open your eyes and see objects at different distances. A book nearby, a window farther away, mountains far away, the sky above. Your brain processes visual information, especially the small differences between what your left eye sees and what your right eye sees, and builds a three-dimensional picture. This is called stereoscopic vision. It creates the strong feeling of depth and distance. But this sense of depth is created. It is not given directly. Babies do not see depth the way adults do. They have to learn it. The brain must develop the nerve connections that turn visual clues into distance. Depth perception is something the mind creates, not raw experience. Close your eyes. The visual sense of space disappears. Now use hearing. A car passes by. You hear it as moving through space from one side to the other. But this is also created. Sound waves reach your ears at slightly different times and strengths. Your brain uses these differences and creates the experience of location. The car is not out there in an absolute way. The feeling of the car being out there is created by your nervous system. Touch adds another sense of space. You feel your hands on a surface. You feel the chair under you. These feelings create a sense of your body being in space, of objects being close or far from your skin. But again, this space experience is built from nerve signals. The sense of three-dimensional space comes from processing, not from the signals alone. What is space without these perceptions? Can you describe it? Can you point to it? You might say space is the emptiness between objects. But emptiness is not a thing. It is a lack of something, and you cannot directly sense a lack. You can only guess emptiness from how objects are arranged that you do sense. You might say space is what lets objects be separate. But separation is a relationship, and relationships need things to relate. Objects are perceived by consciousness. Their separation is perceived by consciousness. Space is the framework that consciousness uses to organize these perceptions. Physics makes the picture even more complex. In Newton's physics, space was absolute. It existed on its own, an endless three-dimensional grid stretching everywhere. Objects had places in this grid. Motion meant moving from one place to another. Space was the stage and matter was the actor. Einstein overturned this idea. In general relativity, space is not a fixed stage. It changes. It bends and stretches because of mass and energy. A massive object like a star bends the space around it. This bending is what we feel as gravity. Objects do not fall because of a hidden force. They follow the curves of bent space. In Einstein's view, space is not separate from matter. Space and matter are connected. The shape of space depends on how mass and energy are spread out. And since mass and energy are always changing, space is always changing too. But Einstein went further. He joined space and time into one four-dimensional structure called spacetime. Space and time are not separate things. They are parts of one system, and this system depends on the observer. Different observers moving at different speeds or in different gravity will disagree about distances and time. There is no absolute space. There is no absolute time. There is only spacetime, and spacetime depends on the observer. Quantum mechanics adds another surprise. At very tiny scales, space becomes blurry. The uncertainty principle says you cannot know both the position and speed of a particle exactly at the same time. The more clearly you know where it is, the less clearly you know how fast it moves. This is not because our tools are weak. It is a basic rule of reality. Particles do not have exact positions until they are measured. Before measurement, they exist as spread-out probabilities across space. The sharp edges of the everyday world fade into quantum uncertainty. Then there is entanglement. Two particles can be linked so that measuring one instantly affects the other, no matter how far apart they are. Einstein called this spooky action at a distance. He thought it showed quantum theory was incomplete. But experiments have proven entanglement is real. The connection is instant and does not depend on distance. How is this possible? If space were a real container, distance should matter. Information should not travel faster than light. But entanglement ignores distance. It is as if the two particles are not truly separate at all, as if space itself does not exist in the usual way. Biocentrism explains these puzzles by rejecting the idea that space exists on its own. Space is not a container that exists before observation. Space is a mode of perception, a way consciousness organizes experience into here and there, near and far, inside and outside. Without consciousness, there is no space. There is only undivided potential that becomes space when a mind perceives it. This explains why quantum particles have no definite position until observed. Before observation, there is no space for them to occupy. The wave function describes possibilities, not realities. Observation collapses the wave function and creates space along with the particle's position. This explains entanglement. If space is a creation of consciousness, then distance is not a true barrier. Two entangled particles are not truly separate. They are parts of one quantum system. The feeling of separation is created by the mind that observes them. Their connection does not break the rules of space, because space is not the deepest reality. This also explains the fine-tuning problem in a new way. Why does the universe have 3 dimensions of space? Why not 2 or 4 or 10? The usual answer is that only 3 dimensions allow atoms and life to exist. But this just moves the question. Why should the universe be built for life? Biocentrism says the universe has 3 dimensions because that is how consciousness experiences. Space is a structure of the mind. The mind creates 3-dimensional experience because that is how minds work. Asking why space has 3 dimensions is like asking why we see color. It is built into perception. Think about what space would be without an observer. No one to measure distance, no one to see objects as separate, no one to define here and there. The idea of space needs a point of view, someone for whom things appear near or far, big or small, left or right. Without perspective, space does not shrink to a point. It becomes meaningless. The question where stops making sense because where only works relative to an observer. This is not solipsism. It does not mean only your mind exists. It means space is a feature of conscious experience in general. Wherever there is consciousness, there is the experience of space. Different observers may experience space differently, just as they experience time differently in relativity. But some form of spatial experience is required for consciousness. You might argue that space existed before life. The universe is almost 14 billion years old. Life on Earth is only about 4 billion years old. For 10 billion years, space existed with no observers. But this argument assumes what it is trying to prove. It assumes time is real and that the past exists independently of observation. Biocentrism rejects both ideas. The past is a present construction. When we say the universe is 14 billion years old, we are using present evidence like distant galaxies, background radiation, and element amounts. All of these are present observations that we interpret as a past. But the past itself cannot be reached. It is a model, a story based on current data. If time is a creation of consciousness, then asking what existed before consciousness makes no sense. There is no before without time, and there is no time without consciousness to experience it. The universe did not exist for billions of years and then create consciousness. Consciousness and the universe appear together. They are 2 sides of the same process. Space and time are the forms this process takes from the inside. This is hard to understand because we are deeply used to thinking in space. We cannot imagine existence without space. We cannot imagine being without being somewhere. But think about dreams. In a dream, you experience space. You move through environments. Objects appear near and far, yet the space of the dream does not exist objectively. It is entirely a product of your sleeping mind. Upon waking, the dream space vanishes. It was never real in the way we consider waking space to be real. Biocentrism suggests that waking space has a similar status. Not that it is unreal, but that it is a construction of consciousness. A more stable and consistent construction than dream space, but a construction nonetheless. The walls around you, the sky above, the vast distances between galaxies. These are real experiences, but they are experiences. They exist as features of consciousness. Without consciousness, there would be nothing for them to be features of. Space is a language, a way of explaining experience, a grammar of perception. And like any language, it depends on minds to speak it. The next chapter faces the deepest fear, death, the end of the body, the silencing of the brain, the stopping of experience. Or is it? If space and time are constructs of consciousness, what happens when the construct dissolves? Perhaps nothing ends at all. Chapter 7. Death does not exist. This is the chapter that changes everything. The chapter that takes biocentrism from an abstract idea about physics and perception and makes it personal, deeply, unavoidably personal. Because if biocentrism is true, then death as you understand it does not exist. The 5th principle of biocentrism states it clearly. The structure of the universe is explainable only through biocentrism. The universe is fine-tuned for life, which makes perfect sense as life creates the universe, not the other way around. The universe is simply the complete spatio-temporal logic of the self. And the sixth principle adds, time does not have a real existence outside of animal sense perception. It is the process by which we notice changes in the universe. And the seventh principle completes the picture. Space, like time, is not an object or a thing. Space is another form of our animal understanding and does not have an independent reality. We carry space and time around with us like turtles with shells. Thus, there is no absolute self-existing stage in which physical events happen independent of life. If space and time are carried with us, what happens when we die? If the universe depends on consciousness, what happens when a conscious being stops existing? The materialist answer is simple and harsh. Death is the end. When your brain stops working, your consciousness stops. The electrical patterns that made up your thoughts and feelings fade away. The atoms that formed your body spread out. You are a temporary arrangement of matter, and that arrangement falls apart. Nothing survives. Nothing continues. You simply stop being. This is the answer most scientists accept. It is the answer suggested by a worldview that treats consciousness as a result of physical processes. If the brain produces the mind, then destroying the brain destroys the mind. Game over. But bioentrism challenges this idea. If consciousness does not come from the brain, if consciousness is fundamental, then the death of the brain does not necessarily mean the death of consciousness. Think about what death really is. A heart stops beating, blood stops flowing, neurons stop firing. The body, that complex machine of flesh and bone, stops working. From a medical point of view, death is the irreversible cessation of biological function. The system breaks down, the process ends. But notice that this definition is completely physical. It explains what happens to the body. It says nothing about consciousness. It assumes that consciousness can be reduced to biological function. So when function stops, consciousness stops too. Bioentrism rejects this assumption. Consciousness is not produced by the brain. The brain is an organ within consciousness. It is a tool that consciousness uses to interact with the physical world. When the tool breaks, the interaction changes, but the consciousness itself does not necessarily end. Consider an example. You are watching a television broadcast. The images and sounds come from the television set. If someone destroys the television, the images and sounds stop. But the broadcast does not stop. It continues invisibly as radio waves. The television was a receiver, not the source. The brain may be like the television. It receives consciousness. It processes consciousness. It gives consciousness a specific form, but it does not create consciousness. When the brain dies, the receiver is destroyed, but the broadcast may continue. This is not proof. It is a possibility, a way of thinking about death that fits with what we know and matches the principles of bioentrism. Now think about time. You fear death because you imagine a future where you do not exist. A time after your death when the world continues without you. This future feels real. It feels unavoidable. It fills you with fear. But bioentrism says time is a construct. The future does not exist out there waiting to happen. The future is an expectation, a mental picture based on patterns seen in the present. The future is not real in the same way the present is real. If the future does not exist independently, then the future in which you do not exist does not exist independently either. The fear of death is fear of something that has no objective reality. It is fear of an idea, not fear of a real situation. The block universe idea from physics supports this view. In Einstein's relativity, all moments of time exist equally. Past, present, and future all exist in the four-dimensional structure of spacetime. Your birth exists. Your death exists. Every moment of your life exists. Nothing passes away. Nothing disappears. The moments you call past are still present in the block. The moments you call future are already present. From this view, death is not an ending. It is a boundary. It is the edge of your world line in the four-dimensional block. Beyond that edge, your personal point of view does not continue. But the moments inside the boundary are eternal. Your life does not vanish when you reach the boundary. It remains forever present in the structure of existence. This may feel like cold comfort. You want to keep experiencing. You want the flow of moments to continue. You do not want to be frozen in a still block. But the feeling of flow is itself a feature of consciousness. It is how you experience time from the inside. The block does not feel still to the beings inside it. It feels like a river. It feels like moments passing. This feeling is part of the structure. When you die, the feeling stops. But the life that had the feeling does not disappear. It exists forever in the block. The you who is reading these words right now exists forever in the fabric of space-time. Now think about something even more radical. The many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics suggests that every possible outcome of every quantum event actually happens. The universe splits into branches. In one branch, the particle goes left. In another, it goes right. Both outcomes are real. Both universes exist. If this is true, then death may not be what it seems. Imagine you are in a situation where death is possible. A car is speeding toward you. In one branch of the quantum multiverse, the car hits you and you die. In another branch, you survive. According to the many worlds interpretation, both branches are equally real. But here is the key question. Which branch do you experience? Some physicists and philosophers have argued that you can only experience the branches in which you survive. This idea is called quantum immortality. From your point of view, you always find yourself in a universe where you did not die. The branches where you died are real, but they are not your branches. They are not the branches that include your consciousness. If this is true, then from a first-person point of view, you cannot die. Every time death is possible, reality splits, and you follow the branch where you survive. You may come close to death many times, but you never actually experience the end. This is speculative. It pushes the many worlds idea to its logical extreme. Not all physicists accept it, but it fits with quantum mechanics and follows from taking many worlds seriously. Biocentrism adds another layer. If consciousness is fundamental, if the universe depends on observation, then the universe cannot exist without observers. Consciousness cannot truly end because ending consciousness would end the universe. The system requires awareness. Awareness cannot be removed from the equation. This does not mean individual personalities last forever unchanged. The Robert Lanza who wrote about biocentrism will not live forever as Robert Lanza. The body will die. The brain will stop working. The specific pattern of thoughts and memories linked to that name will change. But consciousness itself, the basic awareness behind all experience, does not depend on any single body or brain. It is the foundation of existence. It is what makes existence possible, and it cannot be destroyed because there is nothing outside it that could destroy it. Death is a transition, a transformation, an end to one kind of experience and perhaps the start of another. But it is not total destruction. It cannot be total destruction because destruction would require a framework of space and time in which something stops existing. And space and time are constructs of consciousness. They cannot contain the ending of consciousness because they depend on consciousness to exist. This is the deepest meaning of biocentrism. It offers a way out of the materialist trap, a way to understand death that does not leave you staring into nothingness. Of course, none of this can be proven. We cannot send explorers to the other side of death and have them come back with reports. We cannot design experiments to test what happens to consciousness when the brain dies. This is an area beyond direct testing. But biocentrism offers a framework, a way of thinking that is consistent with quantum mechanics, with the observer effect, with the relativity of space and time. It takes the puzzles of physics seriously and follows them to their logical ends. And those ends suggest that death is not the end. That consciousness is not a short spark in an uncaring universe. That you are more than a temporary arrangement of atoms meant to fall apart. You are a participant in the creation of reality. You are the universe experiencing itself. And that experience does not stop when one body dies. It continues, it changes, it lasts. The fear of death is natural. Evolution built it into us because beings that fear death live longer and have more children. But the fear is based on a misunderstanding. It is based on the idea that consciousness comes from matter, that death is the final stop. Biocentrism challenges that idea, and by challenging it, it offers something valuable. Hope, not the hope of a religious afterlife, not the hope of heaven or reincarnation based on belief, but the hope that comes from taking consciousness seriously, from understanding that the observer matters to what is observed, from realizing that space and time are not prisons but constructions. You will die, your body will fail, your brain will stop, but you, the awareness at the center of your experience, may last longer than you ever imagined. The quantum connection awaits. The strange experiments that support these bold ideas. The evidence from laboratories showing that the observer truly matters. Science is catching up with philosophy, and what it is finding may change everything. Chapter 8, The Quantum Connection. We have talked about quantum mechanics throughout this journey. the double-slit experiment, the observer effect, wave function collapse. But now it is time to go deeper and look at the full range of quantum effects that support biocentrism and show how the strange behavior of the subatomic world points to consciousness as a basic part of reality. Quantum mechanics is the most successful theory in the history of science. It predicts the behavior of atoms and subatomic particles with amazing accuracy. Every piece of modern technology, from smartphones to medical scanners to the device you are using right now, depends on quantum mechanics being correct. The theory works, but no one knows why it works. No one knows what it truly means. The math is clear. The equations describe probability waves that change in a set way until a measurement is made. Then the wave collapses and one clear outcome appears. The collapse is instant and seems random. It cannot be predicted. Only the chances of different outcomes can be calculated. This mathematical structure makes perfect predictions. But it raises deep questions. What is a probability wave? Is it a real physical thing or just a math tool? What counts as a measurement? Why does measurement cause collapse? And what role, if any, does consciousness play in this process? Physicists have suggested many interpretations to answer these questions. The Copenhagen interpretation developed by Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberg in the 1920s says that quantum mechanics only describes our knowledge of systems, not the systems themselves. Before measurement, particles do not have definite properties. The wave function represents our lack of knowledge. Measurement updates our knowledge, and the wave function collapses as a result. But this interpretation creates its own problems. What counts as a measurement? Any physical interaction or only interactions that result in knowledge gained by a conscious observer? Bohr was unclear on this point. Heisenberg seemed to lean toward consciousness having a role. Others in the Copenhagen school denied it. The many worlds interpretation proposed by Hugh Everett in the 1950s avoids collapse entirely. Every possible outcome of every quantum event actually happens. The universe splits into branches, and each branch is equally real. There is no collapse because nothing is ever removed. Every possibility becomes real in some branch. This interpretation has become more popular in recent years. It is mathematically neat and avoids the problem of collapse. But it has a huge ontological cost. It suggests that there are countless versions of you living out every possible version of your life. The number of universes is far beyond counting, and there is no way to test whether these other universes truly exist. Other interpretations suggest hidden variables, pilot waves, spontaneous collapse processes, or new physics that might explain quantum behavior without using consciousness or many universes. None has reached agreement. The measurement problem remains unsolved. Biocentrism offers its own view. Consciousness is not added on to physics. It is central to physics. The reason measurement causes collapse is that measurement involves observation. Observation involves consciousness. Without consciousness, there is no collapse. There is no definite reality. There is only the constant movement of quantum possibilities. Let us look at some experiments that support this idea. We have already talked about the double-slit experiment in detail. When particles are watched as they pass through the slits, they act like particles. When they are not watched, they act like waves. Just having information about which slit changes the result. But there are more advanced experiments that go even further. The quantum eraser experiment is one of the most remarkable. In this setup, particles go through a double slit and information about which slit they go through is recorded. As expected, the interference pattern disappears. The particles act like particles, but then the experimenters erase the which path information. They design the setup so the information is destroyed before anyone can see it. And when the information is erased, the interference pattern returns. The particles act like waves again. Think about what this means. The particles had already passed through the slits. The interference pattern had already disappeared. But by erasing the information, the experimenters changed the outcome after the fact. It is as if the particles went back in time and chose to act differently. This does not fit with a simple materialist view. Matter does not change its past behavior because of what happens later, but quantum mechanics allows this. The delayed choice quantum eraser shows that the present can affect the apparent past. Biocentrism explains this. If the past is a construct shaped by present observation, then erasing information in the present can change what appears to have happened. Time is not a fixed background where events happen. Time is woven into the fabric of conscious experience. Past and present are parts of one ongoing process. Another important experiment involves entanglement. We touched on this earlier, but let us go deeper. When two particles are entangled, they become linked in ways that cannot be explained by normal physics. If you measure one particle and see it spinning clockwise, the other particle will always be spinning counterclockwise, no matter how far apart they are, no matter how quickly you make the measurements. Einstein found this very disturbing. He called it spooky action at a distance. He believed it showed that quantum mechanics was incomplete. There must be hidden variables, local features of the particles that decide the results ahead of time. The connections are not really instant. They are set up in advance. But experiments have ruled out hidden variables. The Bell test experiments done since the 1970s show that no local hidden variable theory can explain these connections. The entanglement is real. The connection is instant. Information seems to travel faster than light. But wait, information cannot travel faster than light. That is a basic rule of relativity. How can entanglement break it? The answer is careful and subtle. Entanglement does not allow faster than light communication. You cannot use it to send messages. The results look random to each observer. It is only when the observers compare results that the connections become clear. No useful information is sent, but the connections themselves are real and instant. The particles are connected in a way that goes beyond space. They act like one system no matter how far apart they are. Biocentrism explains this by denying that space is truly fundamental. If space is created by consciousness, then distance is not a real barrier. The particles are not truly separate. They are parts of a single quantum system. The feeling of separation is created by the minds that observe them. Their connection does not break the rules of space because space is not the deepest reality. Another line of evidence comes from quantum cognition. Researchers have found that human decision-making sometimes follows quantum patterns instead of normal ones. Choices that should be separate turn out to be connected. Probabilities combine in ways that break ordinary logic. The math of quantum mechanics describes how people think better than classical probability theory. This does not mean the brain is a quantum computer. The brain is warm and wet, a place where quantum effects are hard to keep stable. But it suggests that the logic of consciousness has a quantum shape. Maybe because consciousness itself is quantum. Maybe because consciousness and quantum mechanics come from the same source. There is also the strange field of quantum biology. Scientists have found quantum effects inside living things. Photosynthesis uses quantum coherence to move energy with almost perfect efficiency. Bird navigation may use quantum entanglement in the eye. Enzyme reactions may depend on quantum tunneling. Life, it seems, uses quantum mechanics in ways that machines cannot yet copy. This fits with biocentrism. If life and consciousness are basic parts of reality, then we should expect deep links between biology and quantum physics. The quantum world is not separate from life. It is the place where life begins and where life has special access. Finally, think about the measurement problem itself. In quantum mechanics, the wave function changes according to the Schrödinger equation. This change is smooth, steady, and predictable. But when a measurement is made, the wave function collapses. This collapse is sudden, broken, and seems random. These two kinds of change do not match. They follow different rules. Why? What makes measurement special? What makes a measurement different from any other physical action? If you try to describe the measuring device using quantum mechanics, you find that it is also in a sewer position. It has not made a clear measurement. It is entangled with the particle it was supposed to measure. The chain of entanglement grows longer and longer. At no point does the wave function collapse. Unless you add an observer, someone who knows the result, someone for whom the outcome is clear. The observer ends the chain. The observer causes the collapse. This is why John von Neumann, one of the founders of quantum mechanics, argued that consciousness is necessary for the theory. Without consciousness, there is no final step in measurement. Without consciousness, nothing ever becomes definite. Not all physicists agree with this idea. Many try to find purely physical ways for collapse to happen. But after 100 years of work, none has been proven. The observer keeps showing up in the equations. Consciousness keeps mattering. Biocentrism takes this seriously. It says the observer matters because observation is how reality becomes real. Consciousness is not just watching a world that already exists. Consciousness is the stage, the actors, and the audience at the same time. Without consciousness, there is no show. There is only the possibility of a show waiting forever to happen. The quantum world is strange. It breaks our expectations again and again, but it also gives Clues, evidence that observation matters, evidence that the past is not fixed, evidence that space is not basic, evidence that consciousness helps decide what exists. These are not proofs of bioentrism. Science does not deal in proofs, but they are hints. Signs pointing toward a picture of reality that is very different from strict materialism. In the next chapter, we will look at the critics, the scientists and philosophers who reject bioentrism, who say consciousness is only a byproduct, who defend the materialist view. They have arguments, they have objections, they have reasons to doubt, but do they have answers? Chapter 9. The critics and the believers. No theory that challenges the foundations of science avoids criticism. Bioentrism has gained strong supporters and strong opponents. The debate has filled journals, books, online discussions, and conferences. It is time to look at both sides, to hear the objections and weigh the responses, to understand why this idea divides opinions so sharply. The critics come from many directions. The first objection is that bioentrism is not science at all. They say it is philosophy or speculation dressed up as science. Real science makes testable predictions. Real science suggests mechanisms that can be checked. Bioentrism, they say, does neither. This objection has some strength. Bioentrism is not a typical scientific theory. It does not suggest new particles or forces. It does not predict new effects that would separate it from standard physics. In that sense, it is more like an interpretation of quantum mechanics than a standalone theory. But Lanza and his supporters reply that interpretation matters. Quantum mechanics has many interpretations, from Copenhagen to many worlds to pilot waves. None of these make different test predictions. They all agree on the math. They disagree on what the math means. If interpretation is allowed in quantum mechanics, why not when discussing consciousness and reality? Bioentrism offers an interpretation that explains the puzzles. It explains why the observer matters. It explains fine-tuning. It explains the hard problem of consciousness. Even if it does not make unique predictions, it offers a clear way to understand things that materialism struggles to explain. The second objection is that bioentrism cannot be proven wrong. There is no experiment that could show it is false. If consciousness creates reality, how could we ever detect a reality without consciousness? Any test would require consciousness. This is a serious concern. Being able to prove a theory wrong is important in science. A theory that cannot be tested may seem like just a story, but this rule is not simple. Many accepted scientific ideas are hard to test directly. The many worlds idea suggests countless universes we can never see. String theory predicts extra dimensions too small to measure. The multiverse idea suggests regions forever beyond our reach. Scientists still take these ideas seriously. What matters is whether a theory is useful. Does it lead to new research? Does it suggest new questions? Does it connect ideas that were separate before? Bioentrism has inspired work in quantum biology, consciousness studies, and philosophy. It may not be testable in a narrow way, but it is not empty. The third objection is that bioentrism misunderstands science. Critics say Lanza gets quantum mechanics wrong. They say the observer effect does not need a conscious observer. Any physical interaction can cause collapse. The double-slit experiment works the same whether a person watches or a camera records. Consciousness is not special. This objection needs careful thought. It is true that many physicists define measurement in physical terms. A measurement happens when a quantum system interacts with a large classical system. The classical system records the result. No consciousness needed. But this idea has problems. What counts as classical? Quantum mechanics is supposed to apply to everything. The line between quantum and classical is unclear. If you apply quantum rules to the measuring device, it also ends up in superposition. The measurement is not finished. The chain never ends. The only way to stop the chain is to add an observer, someone who knows the result. The Copenhagen interpretation was unclear about this. Some versions seem to require consciousness. John von Neumann and Eugene Wigner clearly argued that consciousness causes collapse, so the critics are not completely correct. Physicists still disagree about the observer. Bioentrism chooses one side of this debate. It is not rejecting science. It is reading science in a certain way. The fourth objection is that bioentrism is solipsism in disguise. It says reality depends on consciousness. But whose consciousness? If the universe needs an observer and I am the observer, does that mean the universe depends on me? That nothing exists unless I see it. This sounds absurd. The sun existed before I was born. Other people have their own experiences. The universe does not revolve around one mind. Lanza has answered this many times. Bioentrism is not solipsism. It does not say only one mind exists. It says consciousness itself is fundamental. There are many conscious beings. Together they shape a shared reality. The universe depends on observers in general, not on one person. Bioentrism does not deny an external world. It denies that the world has fixed properties like space and time without observation. The world is real, but its reality is tied to consciousness. This is closer to idealism than solipsism. The fifth objection comes from neuroscience. We know much about how the brain relates to experience. Damage to certain brain areas causes specific changes in awareness. Anesthesia removes awareness by changing brain activity. The links between brain and mind are strong and reliable. This suggests consciousness comes from the brain, not the other way around. This is one of the strongest objections. The evidence from neuroscience is large and convincing. It clearly shows that experience depends on brain activity. But connection is not the same as cause. Just because brain activity matches conscious experience does not prove the brain creates consciousness. It could also mean the brain receives or filters consciousness. Think about a television again. If you open a TV and change its parts, the picture changes. Break the tuner and you lose channels. Break the screen and you lose the image. The links between parts and picture are clear. But no one says the TV creates the broadcast. The TV receives it. The links show how receiver and signal relate, not how the signal is created. Bioentrism suggests the brain may be like a TV. It receives and shapes consciousness. It does not create it. The strong links between brain and mind reflect the connection between consciousness and the physical world, not the source of consciousness itself. This is not proof, but it shows neuroscience does not fully settle the question. Beyond the critics are the believers, scientists, and thinkers who find bioentrism convincing, or at least worth serious study. Some supporters come from quantum physics, researchers who have struggled with the measurement problem for years and find consciousness-based ideas appealing. After a century, no purely physical explanation for collapse has won agreement. Maybe it is time to take the observer seriously. Others come from philosophy of mind. They have struggled with the hard problem of consciousness and find materialism lacking. They see bioentrism as a middle path, one that takes consciousness seriously without leaving science. Others come from meditation and inner exploration. They report experiences that do not fit materialism, experiences of awareness without thoughts, experiences of consciousness separate from the body. These are not scientific proof, but they motivate interest. They suggest something important may be missing. Some are drawn to bioentrism because of what it says about death and meaning. In a materialist universe, death is the end. Consciousness stops. Nothing remains. Many find this hard to accept. Bioentrism offers another view. If consciousness is fundamental, death may not be the end. The body dies, but awareness may continue in some way. This is comforting, but comfort is not evidence. Wanting something to be true does not make it true. Still, motivation matters for deciding which questions are worth asking. If bioentrism opens new paths of thought, that has value even if it is eventually wrong. The debate continues. It is unlikely to end soon. The questions are deep, the evidence unclear, the stakes high. But the debate itself matters. It forces us to question assumptions. It pushes the limits of science. It keeps consciousness in the discussion. Robert Lanza knew his idea would face resistance. History shows many ideas were rejected before being accepted. This does not mean bioentrism will win. Many rejected ideas deserved rejection. But it means criticism alone does not decide the issue. The question remains open. Consciousness has been placed back on the table. That alone is an achievement. Chapter 10. What if they are right? We have traveled far from the night sky that makes you feel small, through the life of a scientist who challenged physics, through quantum mechanics where observation shapes reality, through space and time that may not exist as we think, through questions about death and survival. Now it is time to step back and ask the most important question. What if they are right? What if consciousness is truly fundamental? What if the universe depends on observers? What if space and time are creations of the mind? What if death is not the end? The effects would be huge. Start with science. For centuries, science has assumed the physical world comes first and consciousness comes second. This idea has been powerful. It gave us medicine, technology, and knowledge. But if bioentrism is right, this idea is incomplete. The physical world is real, but it is not the whole story. Consciousness is deeper. This would not destroy science. It would expand it. It would create new questions. How does consciousness relate to quantum waves? How do many observers create one shared world? What rules govern consciousness itself? These are scientific questions. They can be studied. Science would become richer and more complete. Now think about philosophy. The mind-body problem has troubled thinkers for centuries. How does experience come from matter? Materialism fails to explain it. Dualism fails to explain interaction. Biocentrism removes the split. Mind is basic. Body appears within mind. Matter does not create consciousness. Consciousness creates matter, or both come from one deeper reality. This idea is not new. Philosophers and Eastern traditions have explored it for centuries. Biocentrism connects these ideas to modern physics. Think about life. If consciousness is basic, then you are not an accident. You are not meaningless. You help bring reality into being. The universe exists partly because you observe it. This does not mean you are the center of everything. It means consciousness everywhere matters. Every aware being plays a role. If death is not the end, fear changes. Death becomes a change, not destruction. A door, not a wall. Think about how we treat others. If every mind helps create reality, harming another is deeply wrong. Ethics gains a strong foundation. Environmental care also gains importance. Destroying life means losing points of view, losing observers, weakening reality itself. Now be honest. Biocentrism is not proven. The evidence is suggestive, not final. It could be wrong. Science requires humility. But even if it is wrong, it has value. It forces us to ask hard questions. The worst outcome is not being wrong. The worst outcome is never asking. Biocentrism is an invitation to wonder. What if the universe is not a machine but an experience? What if we are the universe knowing itself? These questions matter even without final answers. Robert Lanza followed curiosity wherever it led. That is the spirit of science. Biocentrism may be right or wrong, but it has expanded the conversation. It has kept the mystery alive. And that matters.